Picture that. But everywhere. Everywhere. What? Cool.
Its entire nuclear arsenal you could launch with a thought.
Keep sticking, mouse. Normal spider, and I'm a normal kid. Can't stop me now.
Nice to meet you.
Sure. Total pleasure.
We'll never be fair.
It's the alien teen sidekicks of Hanna-Barbera's Super Friends animated series of the 1970s remain one of the strange outliers in the overall DC universe. These two definitely hang out on the goofier end of the DC pantheon, owing largely to their cheesy catchphrase and flat-out bizarre powers. Oh, and the fact that they basically have to fist bump or touch rings in order to transform. While Jaina could boast a reasonable amount of utility with her ability to transform into any animal, Zan is kind of limited to ice and water forms, and has had to bend over backwards to serve any kind of useful purpose. So this led to things like Zan preventing a fall by turning into a giant gelatin dessert, and Jaina carrying her brother from place to place in a bucket. Also, they didn't really have any thematic connection to each other, and beyond their ability to activate their powers by touching, their superpowers felt very random and very forced. With a moniker that's just skin, this next guy isn't starting off too strong. What's his power, you ask? 6 feet of extra stretchy skin. Angelo Espinosa was a former gang member from the East Los Angeles area who faked his own death for numerous reasons. Most importantly, to hide his newly manifested mutation from his family and to leave that part of his life behind. Skin was one of 4 young mutants, including M, Husk, and Blink, that were abducted by a techno-organic alien race. Why? Well, they wanted to uncover the secrets behind powers. Going back to Skin, his power, those 6 feet of extra flappy skin, that's gotta be hell on wheels to lug around. Skin isn't a combat organ. It's so weak against damage that we invented armor. It's so weak against nothing that we invented clothes. When your mutant power makes you more vulnerable to injury, you really shouldn't be calling attention to yourself, which is advice that Skin did not take. He was eventually went the way of Jesus on the lawn of the X-Mansion, and the wrong name was written on his gravestone. Then he was dug up and cremated. Look, that's just a way of writing somebody out with extreme prejudice. Even in Skin's depiction, his backpack had really unnecessarily long flaps. Like, this guy just couldn't cut a break. Rainbow Girl has a very unique ability, the power of emotions. In her first appearance, she was able to create a pheromone field that resembled a rainbow through her powers. Now, this caused everybody near her to like her. Now, while this didn't continue in future iterations of the character, it was an interesting addition to a somewhat confusing ability. Unfortunately for Rainbow Girl, she suffers from mood swings because of those abilities. One concrete use of her abilities is that she can fairly easily use different types of lantern core rings. So she's been depicted using the red ring, which is based on anger, the blue ring, which runs on strength, and the green ring, which relies on willpower. Presumably she can use the others as well. So her power clearly augments that of other devices when applicable. Even though Rainbow Girl herself doesn't understand the full extent of her power, she is using them for good as much as she can. The ability to detach limbs doesn't seem very useful at first glance, and the Legion of Superheroes kind of agrees with me, because they rejected Floyd Belkin, otherwise known as Arm Fall-Off Boy, when he tried to join the organization. Granted the ability to detach and reattach his limbs at will, Floyd could extend his reach and leverage at the cost of having the full use of his limbs. Floyd Belkin, by the way, is not the only character to have this power. Corey Pitzner, also known as the Detachable Kid, had the exact same abilities. Granted, unlike Floyd, Corey decided to put his powers to use for villainy, even briefly joining the Suicide Squad. While both characters were relatively successful in their fields, with Floyd even assisting the Legion of Superheroes on occasion, despite his rejection, this is a power that is obviously more hindersome than helpful. Only a handful of Marvel characters have used the Minoru's family Staff of One. This staff used to be an ancient magical entity that was called the One, but Tokiko Minoru, so Nico's ancestor, conquered it and turned it into a magical weapon that has gone through many generations in the family. Now, this is a unique weapon because it only works if you shed human redness. Even if your gums are exuding some redness, that's gonna work. The strength of the spell also seems to be directly tied to the amount of redness shed. Also, it can only cast each spell once per user. Any attempt at the same user repeating a spell results in either a complete failure or an unpredictable magic result. So that means Nico has to be very creative whenever she uses it. There isn't any other staff like this one in the comics. Sure, the staff is almost limitless in its powers, but you got the drawbacks. So is it worth it? As the nature of his powers have changed over the years, Green Lantern has had plenty of weaknesses, but I think his greatest weakness is one that I think we all want to forget, and only after one villain managed to come up with an exploit that is actually based on how Green Lanterns use their powers. So the Green Lantern guys use their power rings to fly. They use them to automatically translate alien languages, and most famously to create energy constructs of any form the user wills. While these abilities needed some sort of weakness to balance them out, the solutions were less than perfect. The original Green Lantern, Alan Scott's weakness to wood, stemmed from his subconscious belief that his powers couldn't affect the material. Now, the later Lantern's weaknesses to the color yellow came from the fear entity trapped within the Green Lantern Corps' central power battery. And while each of these explanations provide a plausible reason for those classic weaknesses, they still feel kinda random. Jin Genie was once an X-Force member who became more powerful the more they imbibed. This character is a mutant who, other than assuredly being a fun time at any beach party, has the ability to create seismic waves equal in strength to the level of alcohol in her blood. So this booze-powered mutant, unfortunately, meets her end early on in her career, though she certainly left quite an impression on the entire Marvel universe. In the universe of the boys is a power that even I can't wrap my mind around. So among the unfortunate test subjects at the Sage Grove Center in the boys is a very weirdly powered individual. Unnamed, but they were shown to have acidic powers, meaning they can spit out upchuck that looks like something melting, and contains acidic subjects that can immediately injure an opponent upon contact. Sounds pretty cool, right? I'm sure we can all agree that superpower is strange, peculiar, but it's got a drawback, or else I wouldn't be here today. So the patient himself is not immune to his own spit. So when he's fighting off everybody, he winds up burning parts of his face with his own spit. One would think that, like, I don't know, immunity to your own powers would be part of the package deal, but I guess not in this case. Although the non-powered Huey has been an invaluable member of the boys from the beginning, he's like, hey, I would like powers. So he's gonna take some Compound V, and he gained the ability to teleport at will. But his power, very notably, doesn't let him bring his clothes along for the ride. So as useful as teleportation is as a super ability, the instant nudeness kinda left him scrambling for clothes, or in the center of very awkward situations. Oh, and if you're hitching a ride with him, yeah, game over for your clothes too. And one more time, because I love the boys so much, Kimiko's brother, Kenji. He was mentioned in the first season, but we didn't really get to see him until season 2, and we see his crazy abilities. So sure, Kimiko, she was able to escape, but Kenji was conscripted and had to serve the big bad Shining Light Liberation Army. Not great. Oh, and did I mention he's got telekinetic hands, which make him a deadly threat? So these powers are first shown when he's able to lift an entire boat and throw it. So we're like, okay, he's powerful. And when he encounters everybody, we're like, okay, boy's got powers, I'm terrified. He's even able to step up to Homelander. He brings like a sewer system down on the soup's head. But here's the thing, his power is limited to his hands. So when Stormfront breaks his hands, Kenji is left powerless and easily killed.
Dead Girl was a mutant with light blue skin, spooky powers, and dreams of fame. Though she appeared regularly throughout the end of X-Force's original run and its continuation, X-Statix, she was constantly overshadowed by her teammates. I can't think of a better way to prepare for Halloween than by chatting about this girlie. Dead Girl first appeared in X-Force 125 in 2002. X-Force members Orphan, You-Go Girl, and Anarchist went to a graveyard to officially recruit Dead Girl into their ranks. Like a good, undead character, she arrived at her first mission wearing tattered clothes and a rope for a belt, so undead casual. However, it was suggested that she was purposely trying to scare her teammates. Though she recounted her past for the team, Dead Girl did not tell them her real name. When Dead Girl was alive, she was an aspiring actor but fell in love with a man who eventually took her life. Her mutant powers manifested when, after the passing, she regained consciousness in a cemetery and realized that she could communicate with her dead cohabitants. The spirits lured the life taker back to the cemetery for her, so Dead Girl pulled him into her grave and made a mattress out of his bones, which is so iconic. While an excellent tale of revenge, much of Dead Girl's origin was still shrouded in mystery. Though she was accepted into X-Force, not even Dead Girl knew the full extent of her powers. She found out quickly, however, that when her body was blown to bits, she could slowly and grossly reform. Dead Girl could also control her dismembered limbs as she choked an enemy with a detached arm. This mutant was creepy and gross and awesome. It was if she came directly from a horror movie into a comic book. The New Mutants had one of the wackiest adventures in superhero history, even by X-Men standards, and the core of those stories from the beginning was Danielle Moonstar. Known as the Mutant Mirage, Dani's powers started out simple enough, if a little mystical and ill-defined, but over the course of her history they would develop, change completely, be lost altogether, and join new powers that had nothing to do with her being a mutant. Starting out as an orphaned girl living on a reservation with her grandfather, Dani experienced precognitive visions of the future and a psychic connection to the animals around her, but her primary power proved to be the ability to craft illusions embodying the fears of those around her that seemed terrifyingly real. While her psychic connection with animals came in handy alongside her teammate Wolfsbane, who could assume a lupine form, Dani took the name Mirage and honed her ability to craft illusions as her primary weapon. Doreen Green, aka Squirrel Girl, is not a typical superhero. She has a unique ability to communicate with squirrels and possesses the agility and strength of her rodent friends. Her seemingly bizarre powers have made her the subject of many jokes, but don't underestimate her. Squirrel Girl has repeatedly proven she's a force to be reckoned with. She has defeated some of the Marvel Universe's most powerful villains, including Thanos. Her unconventional tactics and problem-solving skills have earned her a dedicated fanbase and a reputation as one of Marvel's most enduring and compelling heroes. The world's smartest person with a huge red dinosaur for an ally couldn't be better. Young superhero Luna Lafayette, aka Moon Girl. With her array of gadgets, her bizarre inhuman ability, and her vast intelligence, Moon Girl has the brains to outsmart just about anyone. Primarily aided by her genius-level intelligence when fighting bad guys, Lunella is the smartest person in the world despite her youth. The 10-story tall beast called Devil Dinosaur assists Lunella in battle. Devil Dinosaur possesses human-level intelligence, sharp claws, and a vicious bite, making him a formidable ally. Moon Girl's inhuman ability allows her to swap minds with Devil Dinosaur, but it's not entirely within her control. Several things can trigger the mind swap, such as stress, anger, or hunger. Additionally, they will spontaneously switch brains during the full moon lunar phase. Lunella carries a variety of tools and gadgets invented by herself to aid her heroic pursuits. These devices include a spring-loaded boxing glove and a taser, all bizarre but certainly functional. Every Marvel fan knows the Avengers, but aside from that main team though, there are several other superhero teams that use the word Avengers, and not all of them are so great. The Great Lakes Avengers especially are a team focused primarily on outsiders and D-list heroes. Big Bertha is one of the most controversial members of this team. In her civilian life, she's a model, Ashley Crawford, but when she wants to, or has to, she can transform into a very obese woman, which didn't sit well with some readers, especially because other characters often make fun of Big Bertha because of her appearance. The good news here is that Big Bertha is incredibly strong and can easily squish a lot of her opponents, and since she looks different in her civilian life, her superhero identity is a well-protected secret, unlike other superheroes who out themselves to the public and then severely regret it later, such as Spider-Man during the Civil War storyline. Still, there are a lot of Marvel heroes who are super strong without the need to transform in such a way, which makes Ashley's power one of the strangest ones. Spring-Heel Jack, also known as just Jack, possesses the extraordinary ability to leap great distances thanks to his incredibly powerful legs. While this power may appear unremarkable compared to some other superheroes, Jack has used his leaping abilities to significantly take down some of the most formidable villains in the entire DC universe. Despite being a lesser-known hero, Jack's acrobatic skills and unparalleled agility have proven valuable assets in combat, allowing him to evade attacks and strike from unexpected angles. With his unique power and impressive combat skills, Spring-Heel Jack is a hero not to be underestimated. Dog Welder, aka also a Jack, is one of the most bizarre superheroes with a disturbing and intriguing ability. As the name suggests, his power involves welding dead dogs to people's faces, which is not for the faint of heart. Despite the grotesque nature of his power, Dog Welder has used it effectively to take down criminals and other villains, making him a valuable asset to his team. While his methods may seem extreme, his dedication to justice cannot be denied, and he is a reminder that even the weirdest powers can be used for good. Johnny D has my least favorite mutation that I've ever seen, and also the strangest mutation I've ever seen. A sentient maw attached to him. It's right in the middle of his chest, and Johnny has named it the Freak. The Freak produces voodoo dolls. To get a doll, Johnny must feed the maw a DNA sample, like hair. The maw will spit out the doll, and Johnny will get full, absolute control over that person. Now, I'm sure that getting people's DNA is probably really annoying, but once you have it and you have the doll, there is nothing Johnny can't do. As it stands, there isn't anyone that he can't control if he has their doll. There is a theory that Johnny is not the mutant, but that the Ma is the mutant, and that it's just attached to a normal Johnny. The Freak does have its own brain, so it's a very real possibility, but they're literally attached, so Johnny, mutant or not, you might as well be. Johnny happened to be one of the only mutants to keep his mutation after M-Day, and can I just say, I would be so mad. Imagine learning that hundreds of mutants lost their powers, but you were still stuck with your chest maw, a chest maw that once tried to hurt you. That would be the start of my villain arc. Personally, Johnny is stronger than me. Jack Hawksmoor can either be the most powerful hero on the battlefield or the weakest, and it depends entirely on one odd factor: the size of the city he's in. Hawksmoor of the Wildstorm universe experiences a symbiotic link with whatever city he's in. The bigger the city, the more powerful he is. In fact, if Jack were to exist outside a large urban center for long, he would literally pass away, so it's imperative that he lives somewhere like New York. The reason Hawksmoor is like this is because time-traveling scientists used him as a lab rat, and he is now more alien organs and foreign objects than human. Jack's city-sanctioned powers are the stuff that you would usually see, like enhanced senses, the ability to stick to walls and also phase himself and others through walls, sometimes fatally to his enemy. Then he also has traditional superpowers with like a city spin on them, like he's capable of telepathy, but with buildings. He can also go up to a window or a mirror and see everything it has seen, almost like it's a personal security camera. He also uses windows and mirrors as a form of teleportation, stepping into one and out another. One time in Jenny Sparks' The Secret History of the Authority, Jack literally turned the entire city of Tokyo into a giant battle suit to fight Kansas City, which also gained sentience for some reason. A final fun bit about Jack's powers is whatever city he's in, he speaks every language spoken in that city, and that is pretty powerful in itself.
Zeitgeist is most often associated with ecstatics. His power is that he can vomit up acid. Ew. He learned he was a mutant with powers in one of the worst possible ways during a makeout session as a teenager. Yeah. The girl he was with at the time survived, but he's never been able to remember her name, and as such, her presence haunts him. He's always wondered if remembering her name would help him to be less tormented by this moment from his past. Zeitgeist is not only weird, but I don't think he has the right attitude for the X-Men either. Sorry, Zeitgeist. Next up, Maggie is another mutant who is just straight up weird looking. In fact, when Alex Ross helped to create her along with Kurt Busiek, he helped to make her look even more strange than she was initially intended to be. Maggie was originally going to be a boy, a little green boy specifically, but Ross wanted her look to contrast even more with Angel, who appears on the cover of this issue with her, flying with his angel wings out while he carries Maggie in his arm. Maggie makes her first appearance in Marvel's issue number 2. She was born with her mutation and because of this was abandoned. She has such a sad story in comics, and while I don't think we ever see her on the X-Men, also because, you know, she's a little kid and they don't normally have little kids on the team. Teens maybe, but usually not like infants. I would love to see her appear more alongside them, just because she has such a unique look and sad origin, and I'd love to see her grow up and like find happiness. Like, she doesn't have to be on the X-Men team, but I don't know, just be cool to see her like being mentored by the X-Men. This next one, Callisto, is too much of a rebel for the X-Men, but she also, for a while there, had tentacle arms, which is why I've included her here. She doesn't have them anymore, to be fair, but I thought that might be an interesting sight to see her recruited in the past, back when she did have her tentacle arms. Her tentacles, however, were not part of her mutation, but instead were given to her by the other mutant warlock, Mask, who can use his powers to change a person's form. Mask did this to torment Callisto, something he's done multiple times throughout her past, both by making her beautiful and by making her less than. If you're wondering how do you torment someone by making them beautiful, it's because she's usually scarred, and he's like, no, you don't have a scar, and like, ha ha ha. Although really, I was thinking, I was like, I feel like Callisto's like, yeah, okay, good prank, I'm gonna go be beautiful, I guess. Alex doesn't have a fancy code name like Maggie either. He is one of the babies we saw in Inferno, the original Inferno, not the new one. His mutant power looks like it's similar to Glob Herman's. Honestly, I love Glob, although it sounds a little bit more useful than Glob's. But while Glob is a bizarre mutant who is well loved, Alex is tragically mostly unknown. I bet you didn't know about him before this list. Ergo, he is both weird and not someone I would imagine being on the X-Men. Alex has a goo body, which he can control, which basically makes him like a living, walking, gelatinous cube from Dungeons & Dragons. Except I don't think he disintegrates those he takes inside his form. Instead, he can only suffocate them, or he can simply engulf them to like just move them somewhere else, immobilizing them for a time. This next one, Cell, is a weird one, which I guess fitting on this list where we got a bunch of weirdos. He kind of reminds me of Maggot, honestly, but if Maggot didn't like have his maggots, his body can fuse the cells of his entire form so that they become one singular cell. This allows him to absorb damage without being hurt, basically reinforcing his form. He can also turn into a liquid-like state as well, and he can also emit ooze that is basically like acid, allowing him to burn those he comes into contact with, digesting them in essence from the outside. He was part of a group of Chicago mutant warlocks and appeared in the miniseries by Jeff Johns and Sean Martinborough titled simply Morlocks. If you know me and what I usually like to talk about on this channel, then you know I'm a pretty big Peeper fan. Peeper is Peter Quinn. My first ever experience reading about him was during Messiah Complex, and from that moment on, I became a fan of his. This might seem odd to you if you read Messiah Complex. Now this might seem odd to you considering that in that story, he calls X Factor to report that he's basically being followed, and he's soon after attacked and killed by Predator X. When Siren later arrives on the scene, it is implied that it is a very gruesome one. But I just tend to gravitate towards the mutants who feel very much like everyday characters. Also, if you're worried about Peeper, don't be worried because he later on just shows up and he's like totally fine. I don't think we've ever gotten an explanation for that, but somehow he's fine. I know it seems like he died horribly, but he apparently didn't. He just shows up later and it's never explained, in case you were wondering. So he's good. But I just tend to gravitate towards the mutants who feel like very everyday characters, I guess. They might not be the ones in the main books, but for some reason, that's what I like about them. Maybe it's because it makes them feel more grounded in reality or more relatable. After all, none of us on this planet are superheroes, and while some people might have abilities that make them seem that way, or might be heroes of a kind, superhero is not something that usually intersects. Characters like Peeper make me feel more seen in a comic. Like Peeper, I too had my own villain era, but am always striving now to be more of a hero in my own way every day. Peeper's powers aren't anything crazy. He has basically superhuman vision, which allows him to see further away, and which also allows him to see like closer up than normal human eyes can see. And while I feel some folks may have forgotten this one in recent years, he can also fire optic blasts. And mostly his eyes just kind of bulge out of his head. His optic blasts, though, I think are lesser strength and like lesser skill set than Cyclops. I feel bad for this next one. We're talking about Amber. She got one pretty cool story where she is clearly established as a college kid who just wants to live her life, and despite being immune, doesn't really let this define who she is or what she's capable of. And then, right after, we think, wow, that's cool. Amber could be a really cool character to follow along, just even in a slice of life story, or especially if she was pulled into becoming a mutant hero. But no, she gets depowered during M-Day. Or at least that's what I believed happened. I'm not sure if it was ever specified. A lot of people were depowered during M-Day, and she's one of the people that we believe was depowered. I don't think she's ever specifically seen after her adventure with Jono during her appearance in his Chamber series. It was a mini series, only a few issues. Amber was definitely weird to behold because her default physical mutation made her green and covered in spikes. But she was actually a shapeshifter who typically shapeshifted into a beautiful woman in her dreams. But she also could control this ability and just shapeshift, I think, pretty normally. I think she just mainly preferred to like just appear as she was, which honestly, super cool. Kind of like Mystique, but what if Mystique wasn't a baddie and just like wanted to chill and go to college? Which I kind of love as a story. While a student at the Xavier Institute, I don't believe this next mutant, Slick, ever made the main X-Men team, nor has he been featured on any spin-off mutant team either. Slick's powers were charisma-based. He basically exuded charisma and made himself likable. He could also cast illusions, as we later learn when he and Quentin Quire's kid Omega butted heads. The two didn't get along, and of course at one point, Quire used his powers to dispel the illusions that Slick was constantly casting. Now these illusions made him appear as a handsome young man, but this was not actually his true appearance, as it turned out. He also had a physical mutation and appeared as a small, web-footed creature with pointed ears. Kind of impish looking, if you want to imagine that, but I'm sure we're showing you a picture right now. After having his true appearance revealed at the moment when he was working on a song with his girlfriend Tattoo, she broke up with him. Maybe not because of his appearance, maybe more because she was like, you didn't even tell me this. I didn't even know this is what you look like. Slither isn't just a weird character, he's also a bad guy, which is why he would probably never join the X-Men. But if he was a hero, I'd be surprised to see him on the main team. For the most part, I'd say that mutants on the main X-Men roster tend to be pretty normal looking. In fact, many of them are also very pretty looking. I think for the most part, this is because the X-Men are meant to be a premier superhero team, serving not just the mutant community, but also the world at large. We don't usually see people with significant significant physical mutations on there. I mean, Beast is big and blue, but he's also often likened to like a giant teddy bear. And even with mainstay Beast, he started out looking just like a normal person pretty much, save for his oversized feet and hands before he went through his secondary mutation. Slither also literally looks like a snake, which I'm sure would make having to save people who are afraid of snakes, a pretty common fear amongst many people, a lot more challenging. And finally, Cool Million. 1, Cool Million is a villain. 2, he is the most 90s I've seen in terms of his character design. And 3, his name is Cool Million. So yeah, I don't think he'll ever be making the cut for the X-Men, ever. Cool Million operated as a mercenary in the comics and at one point was hired to work for Hydra. His mutant power was apparently psionic and that of persuasion, but he could only persuade people while like maintaining eye contact with them. However, I don't know, it could have been lasting. Like, I'm like, you do this, and then you go off and do it. But I like to imagine that you have to maintain eye contact the entire time, because that's funnier.
Once upon a time, Superman could shoot a mini version of himself out of his hand. He can't do it anymore, which is unfortunate, but it was fun while it lasted for everyone but Superman. Let me explain. This was a story from 1958, Superman Volume 1, Issue 125. Eons ago, an unspecified alien race crashed their little spaceship on Earth. Superman eventually found it, but the second he touched it, it exploded. It wasn't until Superman attempted to stop some criminals a little while later that he realized all his powers, except his invulnerability, had disappeared. But to his surprise, he had gained a new power, a tiny little Superman that would shoot from his hand whenever he wanted to use his powers. So instead of Superman just using his heat vision, an extra step was added and he first had to throw out the mini-him to get the job done. The mini-Superman appears to act on the command, either spoken or mental, from Superman. The people of Metropolis and around the world loved Mini-Superman. They think he's the bee's knees. Superman, on the other hand, while he thought the little guy was neat at first, he was getting tired of him pretty quick. See, Superman couldn't do anything. When the little guy was out saving the day, Superman was left on the sidelines feeling pretty useless, and we all know how much he likes to help people. As much as the comic is fun, it also delved into the emotional side of Superman grappling with the loss of his powers and how that makes him feel as a hero. Eventually, the little hero does disappear. A kryptonite meteor was headed towards Earth, and Mini-Super directed it away from Superman by physically forcing it away, causing him to disappear forever. Once the mini-hero was gone, Superman, much to his relief, gained all of his powers back. I will admit, this is my favorite random Superman power, and I wouldn't mind if it eventually made a comeback. Superman's ability to turn invisible and intangible by vibrating his molecules fast enough makes enough sense that I'm just not gonna question it too much. A notable time Superman used his super speed to turn invisible was in Superman the Man of Steel 110. He's invisible because he vibrates so fast that light just doesn't hit him. Superman showed off his intangibility in Superman Volume 2, Issue 175 during a fight against Doomsday. The villain couldn't lay a hand on the hero until he let him. This was also happening during Superman's monologue to the villain about how Doomsday used to not feel pain, so really rubbing it in his face. Superman has what is referred to as plastic features. The language that is used to describe Clark shifting his appearance makes it sound like he doesn't just shapeshift, but actually physically twists and molds his face to how he wants it to look. This power is from the Earth 2 Superman, so like the version active mainly during the Golden Age. One example of a time Superman messed with his face was in Action Comics 55. He stumbled on a fight in which the good guy was outnumbered and also physically no match for his opponents. So Superman snatched the guy out of there, twisted his features, took the guy's place, defeated the bad guys, and then switched them back. Of course, knowing that Superman has the potential to change his literal face around, why didn't he just do that to keep a secret identity? My guess is it's probably easier to take off some glasses than to reconfigure your face every time. Moving into the movies from the 1980s, Superman 2, Superman displayed his amnesia kiss power. Super fun, love the implications of this. How does it work? That is still up for debate even over 40 years later. Lois Lane, during this movie, knew Superman's secret identity, and it was weighing on her, so in an act of mercy, I guess, Clark decided to give her a super kiss that would erase her memories of his secret identity and only that. Nothing else in her memory was affected, just those memories. For a guy that can't handle magic, it sure seems like the explanation for a lot of stuff. Many people think that the Superman 2 scene may have been inspired by early Superman comics. In Action Comics 306, Clark Kent was at the Daily Planet's Christmas party. There was some mistletoe hanging and Lois and Clark found themselves under it. Lois promised to kiss Clark as if he were Superman, so Clark rose to the challenge and kissed her as Superman, literally giving her a super kiss. She does come up from it dizzy, so while there was no memory wipe involved, it certainly had an effect. I wonder if the magic movie kiss could be explained in a similar way to how the Professor X Moira kiss from X-Men went, that there was maybe an element of telepathy involved, especially because Superman has shown that he has the power of mind control. Again, this was in the earlier days of Superman comics in Superman 45 from 1947. The hero is shown using his telepathic will control, so technically it's not mind control, I guess if we were being specific. In this comic, Superman had been kidnapped by aliens and placed in a creepy trophy museum. He was physically incapacitated, however his mind was still active, so he used his will control against an alien wearing the tech that he would need to get home, getting them to remove it from their body. He then knocked his glass cage down and used the plastic face twisting thing we talked about before to transform into one of the aliens. He was able to grab the tech, save the other prisoners, and escape, destroying the alien tech once they all got back home. Overall, there is one major criticism when it comes to the whole Clark Kent Superman disguise thing, and that's people saying that only wearing glasses as the disguise is kind of silly. Many people claim that they would absolutely recognize someone if they just put on glasses, and now that we know about Clark's shapeshifting abilities, the man has no excuse, but maybe, just maybe, there was once a reason why Clark's glasses just did the trick. Apparently, they were once briefly hypnotizing people into believing that Clark Kent and Superman were physically different people. The way the story went is when Clark was a kid, he destroyed his glasses using his heat vision while wearing them, so he went to the rocket that delivered him and found that the glass on it happened to shatter in two perfectly rounded pieces that just happened to be the right size for his glasses, because Clark seems to have super luck too. Superman reasoned that the properties of the glass must intensify the low-level hypnotic effect of his eyes, meaning that when he wears them, they help him project what he wants people to see when he looks at them. So Clark Kent appears as scrawnier and less handsome, but the glasses come off and poof, it is strong and pretty Superman. Back in the movies, that time in 1987's Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, Superman seemingly rebuilt the Great Wall of China after it was destroyed. However, it appeared he did it just by looking at it. Now we already know that Superman can make himself vibrate so quickly he can turn invisible, so maybe he was just moving so fast we didn't see it. Either way, it's a giggle-worthy moment for many super fans. Superman's power of total memory was once mentioned in Superman 156. Basically, he contracted a deadly virus and he was just trying to remember anything he could about it from his life back on Krypton before, when he was a baby, meaning he was accessing his total memory power, what we would all call eidetic memory. Now it seems that if you put super in front of anything, it is now a Superman power. So here are just a few incredible ones that I came across during my research for this video. Super mathematics. Instead of just saying that Superman was a genius, they went with this. Then there was super heartbeat control. Some villains tried to hurt Superman using kryptonite, only it wasn't real kryptonite, but Superman had to make them believe he had passed on, so he just stopped his heart. Super ventriloquism. Superman is able to make it sound like his voice is coming from another location, even projecting his voice all around the world. That could also be referred to as super yelling, which he has also done. The Golden Age was certainly an era of fun and the gift that kept on giving.